Yeah, talofa, it's yeah, it's me again. Yo, ako ngili lua aso hongo ngi yo Aparila, 2024. I'm in the gym at the Logan Metro Indoor Sports Gym. Making my way there eventually. Looks like it's packed with kids playing basketball. So we're gonna be indoors today. So it's gonna be basketball and what have you. There's no parking. Members are meant to have special parking spaces, but there's not much places for me to park anyway. So anyway, let's go get this. Okay. Try to lock up the car, eh? Almost doesn't work. Yep. Just been watching the Ukrainian war and seeing how NATO was celebrating their 75th anniversary. It's 75 years since they were formed. It's discussing how the original West German members of NATO were actually former Nazis from World War II, which explains why they would have sown the seeds for the current continuation of Operation Barbarossa against the Russians, with their descendants, obviously, and we'll get used to it. Anyway, seeing everyone.
Hey Tim, how are you?
Good. We're heading in to the school kids doing their basketball. It's a basketball tournament. Queensland school kids. We're just going straight into the gym. Okay. Now we're here. Alright. I'll talk a bit. So anyway, walking through the gym up to the first floor. So they've got an aerobics class on. I've got the whole place to myself. Wow, no, not really. Everyone's next door, so we can have a glimpse. So that's next door. Sister's over there, she's going to go on that. So that's what we're up to. I'll turn on the fan, put the TVs on. came out with Sis and got into the car, and I left my mobile phone. So I had to go back in. Dropped off Sis at the shops, but I had to go back to the Logan Metro to pick up my phone. So anyway, that'll do. Yep. So driving home now. Traffic is pretty busy. So anyway, we're talking about this situation in Ukraine with NATO. They celebrated their 75th year of their formation, and the formative NATO commanders were actually from West Germany, were actually former Nazis who, and it would not be surprising, I can't confirm it, but I know by slight indication from their historical past that most of those officers in the Wehrmacht, the Nazi Wehrmacht, were actually most likely were participants in the Operation Barbarossa. They had survived it, because the Sixth Army of the Wehrmacht were instrumental in that main operation, and so NATO was celebrating their 75th anniversary, and they were cutting their cake, and it occurred to me that a lot of these people are actually descendants of those NATO commanders, and inadvertently they would be descendants of former Nazis. And interestingly, the story of the presidents of the EU, her grandfather and her great-granduncle her granduncle was actually Karl Albrecht, a German administrator during the Ukrainian occupation by the Nazis during 1942, and also the SS Waffen Galicia division that was formed in Ukraine were actually members of Ukrainian soldiers, a division who served under the SS Waffen, who fought against the Soviet Army, the Red Army, and the Ukrainians were part of it. There was at least a divisional size of about 50,000, over 50,000 Ukrainians who served in the Waffen SS Galicia division under Adolf Hitler's Sixth Army, Wehrmacht, the Sixth Wehrmacht. So that is a historical fact about the connection with the Nazis and Ukraine during World War II. But in saying that, that's the history as we know of it, and how the Ukrainians would have been sowing the seeds of for the current world, the current Ukrainian war. So the seeds of anti-Russian and the expectations of a Ukrainian war with Russia, and Russia being a likely NATO conflict, a likely case scenario, would come into fruition now, as 75 years later. You would have your Casus Belli, such as MH17, and which would give a good reason why NATO troops would partake, especially with Australians being and Dutch passengers being killed in a Malaysian Airlines. The Australian Federal Police had conducted, the joint investigation team had conducted their forensic investigations on the matter, came up to the conclusion that the Ukrainians' investigation was acceptable to the Dutch and Australian Federal Police, which is highly dissatisfactory as far as I'm concerned. The findings was subjected to a lot of conjecture, and the evidence that I had gathered from my Russian military source suggested, and very strongly suggested, that the 27 Ukrainian books that were stationed within Donetsk Oblast in 2014, when I did my YouTube report on it, which was taken down by YouTube. They deleted it in 2014. I had drawn my conclusions using the footages and photos that I had gathered from the Russian intelligence and the Russian military intelligence and their forensics evidence through Russian military satellites and photographic evidence that they gave, pinpointing all of the known book locations, book batteries, surface-to-air missile batteries within Donetsk. They even identified the actual book battery from Ukraine. That evidence was rejected by the International Criminal Court, and the evidence that they had gathered was based on an interview with Reuters and an excitable neo-Nazi Donetsk commander who took the credit for the shooting down of what he presumed was an Antonov transport plane, but as it turned out, it was a Malaysian Airlines. Watch out!
Oh, sorry.
The Malaysian Airlines video airplanes. So I'm recording, Michelle.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So that's what happened in 2014. Now I gave my evidence, and that evidence was given to I actually just shared the evidence that was given to me by the Russian military and from the Ministry of Military Government, the Russian government. So anyway, that was rejected, and the JIT, which included the Australian Federal Police, conclusively believed with what the Ukrainians had given to them, ignoring the fact that as a modus operandi, because I'm an investigator, that's my qualifications, you always start off with the motivation, the opportunity and means. Now that's how you conduct your deductive investigations of a crime. So investigation regarding the crime that was committed by these Ukrainians book surface-to-air military elements, batteries, soldiers who shot it down, were obviously under orders to do so, but they would concoct a false evidence and a false flag, pinpointing that it was a Russian book missile system that was driven into Donetsk from Russia, fired a missile and shot down MH17, and then drove back to Russia, which is a load of crap. But that's the evidence that they gave, and it was based on a Reuters interview with a Donetsk commander who had nothing to do with it. He just took credit for something that was nothing that he didn't know anything about. And anyway, they took it as evidence and considered it as incriminating evidence to put him behind, or to get that guy implicated and implicate Russia, which is a load of rubbish. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I did that in 2014 as part of my purview as a national security analyst. I've done national security subjects since I've been studying military intelligence and national security matters since since I finished University of Queensland doing my postgrad. My BA was in political science and government at University of Queensland. So I ended up branching into national security, doing my master's in police intelligence and counter-terrorism at Macquarie University. And that's over a decade ago. That's after doing other things like triathlons, other sporting events, rugby league, martial arts, fighting, doing all types of things. So that was that. I'm talking. So anyway, that was that's my background, and of course I realised that the anti-Australian or anti-Russian, the Russophobes here in Australia, are basically based on not on criminal investigation objectivity, but it's based on politics and ideology. And people who deal with ideologies and politics and military ideologues will ignore the fact that when you're dealing with criminal acts of terrorism, you ignore everything. It's just like in Crocus City Hall terrorism, you ignore the fact that ISIS is meant to be a Islamic jihadist terrorist organization, but during Ramadan, Islamics would not commit criminal activity, and that's simply because, as religious Muslims, they observe Ramadan according to their beliefs. They don't do anything violent towards anyone. They do their 5 prayers and fasting. So the fact that they consider it as a jihadist attack is doesn't correlate to their Islamic belief systems. So that's Ramadan. So Ramadan is over, and for us who are brought up as Christians in the West, we don't really observe those types of rituals, but we respect them anyway, in a multicultural society that we live in. But you get all your prejudices, especially by the social elites and political elites here in Australia, and New Zealand and Britain and the Five Eyes in particular. They're completely biased, very subjective, very racist, very Anglo-centric, very Eurocentric, and basically, as a Samoan, I'm not a sycophant, and I would stand alone. And I've lost my work working with the federal government and state government and various security companies. That's simply because I have to deal with intolerance and political capture, and just being in the country that has a lot of mainstream assimilationist attitudes that does not correlate with my beliefs as a Samoan and as an Australian and as a New Zealand born Samoan brought up in Australia, New Zealand, you know, in the over half a century of my existence. And you know, after over a half a century of my existence, I know a thing or two now, probably more than most people. But you have to deal with intolerances, prejudice, ignorance. But I'm ignorant in many things. I mean, I can't design a rocket and to fly to the moon, so I'm ignorant in that. We haven't discovered 3 or 2 nanometer semiconductor wafers, but we're working on it, and that's the human, you know, advancement on technology. I haven't designed a hypersonic missile, and that is what a Russian and a Chinese has already done. But no Australians ever designed it. No Australians ever. Although an Australian did invent the scramjet, and that was a University of Queensland patent, and that's my alumni, and that's my alma mater. But you know, we've got a lot of imperfections in our lives, and those are my imperfections. I don't know everything, so there you go. So anyway, the point I'm saying is that too many people would toe the line and would go with the flow, whatever the mainstream media and the social engineering processes would indoctrinate people to think the way they want you to think. For instance, NATO. Now, back to 75 years of NATO, you would notice that the neo-Nazi and Nazi attitudes have filtered in to the Europeans and the Eurocentric Europeans. They have that attitude, that arrogance of that white supremacist attitude which permeates throughout the world, and in this modern international rule of law is actually determined by the Anglo-centric and Eurocentric rule makers, the decision makers, such as the International Criminal Court judges. They're predominantly Europeans with their Anglo-centric jurisprudence upbringing. So their international rule of law is based on Eurocentric and Anglo-centric perspectives, ignoring the Sharia laws of the Islamics or the secularist, atheist, or even the animism belief systems of other cultures. And that's just the way it is. They're Eurocentrically biased, or even ignoring the Asiatic faiths, the Shintoism of the Japanese, the Buddhism of Asian cultures. They ignored all these things as part of their religious belief systems, including the Indian Hinduism. See, a lot of these views and their belief systems are ignored by the Eurocentric and Christianized international rule of law. And of course, as Samoans, we're predominantly cajoled into believing the Western Eurocentric Christian zeal and the influence of the Palangi Christians, including having to wear whites on a Sunday. You know, every Samoan wears white on a Sunday because back in the days they believed that it's a white man's religion and you got to be white to be in a church. And so Samoans dressed up in white, and then they turned it around and gaslit it. They gaslit it as it's a sign of purity, when in fact it wasn't. It was actually a sign of racial purity. It's a white man's religion, so you got to be dressed up in white. But anyway, you get things like that. You know, it's people are indoctrinated and brainwashed, and then they whitewash your cultural understanding of religion. And nowadays, people just accept it, and the Samoans accept it. Like in Samoa, they got the Samoan Parliament where they stick on top of the speaker's chair the picture of Jesus Christ. He looks like a long-headed white European hippie. Doesn't even look like a Jew. He looks like an Englishman with a beard and long hair. But that is the conception of westernized Christian values and perceptions that have been indoctrinated into the simpleton minds of many cultures, including Samoans. But you get that. But I'm used to being targeted and reviled by people, but frankly, I don't care. I don't care, and that's just the way it is. Yeah, manguia le aso, yeah, ko fa.